Starting with this lesson, we're going to start working on our textual criticism skills. So for this exercise, I've asked you to start working on establishing the text. And I've assumed at this point that you've done the reading and you have some familiarity with the introduction to the UBS-5 and the textual apparatus. And for this lesson, very simple. All I'm asking you to do is use the USB textual apparatus to identify the types of manuscript evidence for this variant in Colossians 1:2. Very simple, just identify the evidence and show me that you know the distinctions. And so here's my example. Here's your text, and here's the variants for verse 2 right here. And so you'll use this apparatus to simply differentiate between the types of evidence that's available to you. Now I'm going to work through an example here, and I'm going to use for each lesson that we do some textual criticism, I'm going to work through the example of Matthew 6:13. So I'm going to switch the text here to Matthew 6:13, and what I've actually got on the screen here for you is the UBS-5 printed text and the Textus Receptus. This is the Greek foundation for the King James Version. And what I want you to see is just really the practical aspect of having some knowledge of textual criticism. So here's Matthew 6:13 in the UBS-5, and this is the foundation of, as I point out over here, this is a rational eclectic text. And it's the foundation for your modern translations, the New American Standard, the ESV, the NIV. But the Textus Receptus is a Byzantine text in character, more or less, and it's the foundation for the King James and the New King James Version, the ones you'll be most familiar with here. And so if you look at the difference is pretty clear. We'll start with the King James. Matthew 6:13 over here, the Textus Receptus. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil, or from the evil one. And then there's this concluding clause, because yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory, eis tu seonis, amen, forever and ever, amen. And that's the one we're familiar with as probably as young people. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever, amen. But you notice in the UBS-5 in modern texts, you do not have that concluding remark. It simply says, and do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Now, very practically, you may have somebody in your church that asks the question, why doesn't my Bible, if they're using a modern Bible, the NIV or something like that, why doesn't my Bible have this concluding clause? And this is a text critical issue. So what I want you to do as a part of this exercise is just list the witnesses and categorize them. And I'll go back to the assignment. The assignment states, use the text critical apparatus to identify the types of manuscript evidence for this variant. And here's how you do it: by listing the types and the manuscript for each type. So here's how I would do that. I found it easiest to create a chart that includes on the left-hand side the variant, and then the types of evidence: the papyri, the majuscules or uncials, the minuscules, the lectionaries, the versions, and the church fathers. So I just created a chart with that, and then what I did here was I just copied from my electronic version the apparatus. Now, I don't expect you to have purchased that, but that's just how I did it, especially just to kind of show you how I went about it. Now, the first portion of this variant is actually the printed text. According to the apparatus, they are with an A rating. They're absolutely convinced that this text, this particular issue, should conclude with the word poneru. And then they list the evidence for that. And now, as you see, when you see this this double parallel line right here, this is the division between one variant and another. So as you can see on my worksheet, I just typed it out and put all the evidence for the printed text, and then each variant I listed it out. Now I don't expect you to do that because that'd be a lot of extra typing and all that kind of thing. I'm just kind of showing you visually the process that you would work through. So as you can see, let's take the printed text here that I've taken from the apparatus, and I've placed that here. Ponaru, which is the printed text. And then I just list out the witnesses by category. The papyri, there's one papyri example. Then the uncials or majuscules, the minuscules, the lectionaries, the versions, and the church fathers. So that's all I've done is categorize the witnesses according to the type of witness. And so you can see the next step, variant 1, and I've listed it out here. Variant 1 is some manuscripts in the tradition just simply add amen at the end of that. And here's that variant and the evidence for it. The second variant, Ponaru, because yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory, Aeston, Aeonis, amen, forever, amen. And then you see in this variant there are lots of sub-variants. For example, this version of the Old Italian omits this part, but in general it's still a witness to variant number 2, and so I list variant number 2 here, and the evidence categorized, the types of witnesses. And that's all in this particular lesson I'm asking you to do. I'm not asking you to do any evaluation. I'm not asking you to date the manuscripts or anything like that. I just want you to be able to properly, correctly categorize the types of witnesses for each variant that you're working with.